episode of Sac Town Talks. What we talking about today, California, city of LA is number one. Unfortunately, some news came out recently that we took out Chicago as the number one urban center for rat infestations. And I plugged it into ChatGPT and I didn't get any good answer. So I thought, you know what, let's call up an expert who can kind of help us understand what's going on in California that our rat population is exploding. With us today is Renee Pinel. Did I pronounce that correct? Pinel?
Yes.
Renee Pinel. She's the president and CEO of Western Plant Health. And hopefully you're going to walk us through this. So it's a little jarring. Chicago was number one for a decade, and now LA is number one. What's going on?
Well, I think what you see in Los Angeles is, one, a lot of homeless are going to gather towards Los Angeles because it has good weather.
Right.
And California has a lot of benefits. So it does tend to attract the homeless population. We also have I think an administration in Los Angeles that has sacrificed to a degree public health in support of ideological goals. And that means that they have not done due diligence in controlling these sort of rodent infestations that are taking place. And the rodents go to where there's food available, which is generally around restaurants. Homeless tend to gather around where there's going to be more food available, which is around restaurants. And as a result, you have rats multiplying at huge levels and rates around these homeless populations. In addition, for California and Los Angeles in particular, is because of the Los Angeles fires. A lot of those rats were driven in from wildlife areas into more urban type areas. And because they don't have the appropriate types of controls to protect those urban centers from rats, now they're basically made the urban areas of Los Angeles their home. There's plenty of food, so why go back out into the wilderness?
So before we dive some more into the issue, thank you for that. Why don't you tell me a little bit? Why do you know about rat populations? I'm headed to Google, and you know this stuff off the top of your head. As the president and CEO of Western Plant Health, why is the rodent issue important to you?
Well, Western Plant Health represents registrants who provide tools to control all types of pests, whether it's insects, rodents, plant diseases. We represent those companies that provide those kind of tools. In addition, we work with farm groups to a large extent to help them both make sure that they can access those kind of tools as well as use them appropriately. And as a result, we're kind of a good intermediary between government and the youth population, because we have expertise and we have access and can see what's actually going on out in the field. And the rodent infestations are impacting urban areas just as much as they're impacting, urban areas as well as rural areas. So we're seeing that transition and that networking between the two types of population areas in California that are now having really the same issue with very different types of populations, but it's still a public health issue either way.
Okay, so we're going to dive down because I want to understand what those connections are. So I think people can, if my experience with rats is my kids love the movie Ratatouille, it's kind of cute. If we see a rat, it's a rare occurrence or something. It's not a direct part of my life on a regular basis. But when you use words like infestation or we're number one sort of in LA, help me understand why an exploding rat population matters. Why should I, who rarely encounter rats, care if that's happening?
Yeah, rats in a cartoon are cute. In the movie, maybe for those who are of a certain age, remember the movie Ben.
Yeah.
It was kind of a cute idea. But the reality is rats and mice carry disease. They're one of the major animal groups that carry disease, and because they do come into where people live, where you have pets, they do then have serious impacts. We've seen news articles about hantavirus. Well, that's primarily transmitted by rats and mice.
That cruise ship?
The cruise ship, yes, that we're all talking about where 3 people died. Hantavirus is primarily spread by mice and rats. And so that's just an example. The homeless population in Los Angeles is seeing almost epidemic levels of the plague. Well, everybody who's studied history a little bit knows where that came from. That is transmitted by rats and mice again. And so while it sounds cute, it has huge human health impacts and risks. And whether it's a rat bites your dog that then comes into your house, a rat bites your child, or whether it's just your food is contaminated because of mice going around in your cupboards, it has huge implications for average families. And if we really want to be realistic, the population group that it's going to most impact are probably going to be the population groups that have the least ability to protect themselves. You know, if you're affluent, you can hire a extermination service. If you're not, you're trying to do it on your own. And you're probably not going to be very effective at it because they multiply at such rates. And they're smart. I mean, rats and mice are pretty smart. They know that if you have a trap and it catches a rat, the other rats are going to say, maybe we shouldn't step on that type of material again. And so they learn to avoid those kind of protections very rapidly. And
they learn to avoid the traps?
Yes. That's one of the major things we've seen in the Central Valley in rural settings is that they're trying to, because they don't have the chemical tools in order to protect themselves against rats, that they're trying to trap them. And the rats get trapped one night, and then the other rats go, that didn't have a very good outcome for Joe. And so they don't go and eat those traps again. They don't eat the bait that's in those traps.
Wow.
And so they're not effective. They're not able to keep up with the amount of rats that are multiplying.
Okay, and I want to get to some of the solutions and think about how we solve it. But first, I want to understand. I think I got a grasp. I understand the homeless population issue. No one's going to be happy about disease spread. We're talking about bringing back the plague.
Yes.
I mean, this is insane. So I understand that in the urban environment. What's the impact in the rural environment?
And in the rural environment, what we're seeing rats, again, multiplying at epidemic levels. And what they do is, they eat the irrigation equipment, which drives up the cost of production for farmers. They live in the trees primarily because they can go up in the trees. It's an easy place to eat. They don't have to worry about a tractor running over them or anything like that. But then the side effect of that is you have farm workers. Now, primarily when you're getting into orchard situations where these rats are literally jumping out of trees. And I'm not saying that as a kind of an anecdotal that happened. It's commonplace. They jump out of the trees, whether it's because they're startled or because they're trying to protect their nests that are in the trees. So now you have farm workers at risk. And they're also at risk because when the rats are running around the fields, now you have rat waste that farm workers now are going to be exposed to. And once you move off the field themselves, these rats are going to move into the food storage areas. So it's a contamination risk to food even before it makes it into the supermarket in an urban setting. So it's almost a domino effect of health risk moving into urban areas and vice versa, because urban areas and suburban areas are moving so much closer to farming areas. Those rats are moving out of those areas onto the farms because of, again, the ready food.
Oh, okay. So I'm seeing the connection now. Bad here, bad there, and the problems are merging.
Yes.
And what we're merging is an exploding rat population that's affecting both rural and urban areas. Homeless population and people with the transmission of disease, and business impacts of being impacted by
the farmers' business as well as their labor is impacted.
Right. Okay. Okay, I think we've got a grasp of the scope and size of the problem. Um, so when we think about what's going on, rats have predators. They hawks and birds and birds of prey eat rats. We have traps, which you've explained doesn't isn't working. So what is the solution? How do we get our hands around
I
this?
think our greatest problem is we're not balancing how to address it. We seem to have come to an either or mentality. Either you accept the fact that you're going to have rats in your house, or the other mindset seems to be that it's a total elimination of every rat in California. And nobody is working under that assumption that that's going to take place. So what we're looking for and are working to advance is the idea of balance. No farmer wants to put non-target species like rats or foxes or any other type of predator at risk, nor do people in urban areas. But the reality is the infestations have now, because of the food supply that we have, the infestation levels are now so high that you simply can't control the population. You have to take the population back to a level that then tools like trapping will be effective. But until you get to that point, you have to eliminate some of these rats. And that primarily is going to probably fall to using more aggressive techniques like chemical rodenticides in order to not eliminate them, but take them back to a population level that controls will work on them.
Well, you had controls for some period of time. We didn't have this problem 20 years ago. What happened that it's now a problem? Like, how did we get here? What is it? Because of the homeless population exploding? What is it that caused the increase that our existing tools got overwhelmed?
It is more political philosophy
Okay.
has gotten in the way.
Okay.
You have people whom are fairly affluent, live in urban type settings that have a sincere concern for protecting non-target species like mountain lions, like foxes, like any type of raptor bird, owls, hawks. It's a sincere concern, but they've taken it to a level where, again, because of the population makeup, it's unrealistic. I mean, if all we had was California natural climate, yeah, those types of predators can control a rat population, but we have now inserted an artificial environment by having people and homes in areas, and therefore you can't simply rely on natural predators to control them. Hawks are not going to fly into highly urbanized areas. I mean,
Right.
they're not going to fly into where homeless people live because they're not going to come in contact with human beings.
Right.
So that's not a viable way or a realistic way to control those
So
populations.
what policies did people who were trying to protect non-target species, what policies did they pursue that created the problem?
What they have done is they have successfully advocated legislation that has resulted in DPR having to basically put a hold on any kind of rodenticide that was being used in order to control these rodent populations. And while DPR is doing their reevaluations to determine the safety of the products and additional mitigations that may be appropriate, there's nothing managing these rat populations as a result. So the reality is that we're allowing the situation to get worse and worse to the point where you need more and more types of rodenticides to bring that population back again. So they're artificially creating an environment that's making the situation worse.
Okay.
And what they refuse to recognize is this is California. We already have the highest level of training and safeguards for professionals who do this kind of work. So it's not like farmers have access to, or anybody else has access to just willy-nilly, use rodenticides. These are highly trained individuals who have been trained not only on how to use the product, but what to look for around the placement of the product to assure to the maximum amount that non-target species are going to be impacted.
Okay, I want to make sure we get to the solutions and the venues and places where those solutions are being discussed. But before we get there, tell me what happens if we do nothing. What's the current situation? We've got a dramatically higher rat population than we did 10 years ago. What happens if we don't do anything?
You will have a lot more sick people. Again, we're talking about diseases like the plague. I mean, and I'm not trying to exaggerate. It's literally we're seeing the plague in these urban areas. You're seeing an increase in hantavirus, which is primarily carried by rodents that move into people's homes or living conditions or around food areas that then contaminate food. They carry fleas, they carry lice, they carry asthma. They tend to exacerbate asthma in children because of the contaminated dust that's in the hair and the fur of rodents. And so you're going to see a lot more illness, a lot more pressure, probably on emergency room situations because of people coming in with these additional illnesses or these childhood type diseases that can be developed like asthma, which puts a burden on the healthcare industry, puts a burden again on people whom perhaps don't have the income level that they can hire professionals to do weekly controls in their houses. So you're going to have a greater burden on probably disadvantaged and underrepresented populations in California, while the more affluent populations can sit back and philosophize about it. So I think that is the main thing that we are concerned about, is it's going to result from a rural standpoint, impacts that are cost inputs as far as the cost of food. Again, these are all kind of like almost domino effects. If food costs go up, food deserts in urban areas increase because lower populations can't afford the food anymore. You're going to see farm workers in rural areas being impacted from a health standpoint. Most farms try and take care of the medical needs of their workers, but again, that just drives up costs artificially because we won't effectively deal with the issue. And then in urban areas, again, you're going to see a lot more illness and disease that maybe people aren't connecting at this point to being the fact that why in the world did someone catch a hantavirus or there are other types of diseases that are even worse. We're going to see more of that increase, more unsafe schools, because again, there's a lot of food that's around schools.
Right.
That's where the rats are going to go. Do you want to put your children in that kind of risk?
No. And I that sounds awful. And
Yes.
so before we talk about like where the venues are, why don't you describe for me, if I give you unlimited power, and I charge you, we want to control the rat population while minimizing the damage to these non-target species, and you don't have any hurdles or barriers, what kinds of solutions would you put forward?
I think we just have to be more realistic in what we need. We are going to need chemical products to control rodents, at least until we get this epidemic level of rats under control. So it's being able to have professionals have access to those tools, to place them, report on them, on their use, have the Department of Pesticide Regulations implement mitigations that assure that that's taking place, that as much as possible non-target species are not being impacted. And then as you move in, as you get those controls in place, you can move back in with trapping. I don't know who wants to move a rat, but I guess you could either trap it to kill it or trap it to move it. Moving it is not very effective because with that rat is just going to then populate someplace else.
Right.
So you're just making the problem your neighbors.
Yeah.
But again, we are going to have stronger controls, and that probably means chemical controls, and that's where I think we get to loggerheads is the lack of any willingness by one side, the advocates for these non-target species, these raptor species in particular, willing to compromise in any way. And again, no one is looking to damage those species. Everybody wants to be protective of them. We want safeguards that are protective of them. At the same time, we need to be realistic about if you're going to have high population areas, if you want to protect the weakest of populations, which is the elderly, homeless, and children, you can't just rely on one way to control it. And I think that's true in anything we look at. Why it doesn't seem to resonate in this particular area is kind of a bit of a mystery to some of us. Right. But I think we all understand that if you rely on one thing, eventually you have resistance, eventually it overwhelms you, and then you have to go to a stronger safeguard. In agriculture, we call it IPM, integrated pest management. Right. You use the least toxic tool first, but you have to have those additional ones so that if a disease or a pest becomes out of control, you can move it back to where then those softer controls work.
And you don't want to use the most aggressive as your only option, because if you do that, they'll eventually get used to that and you run out of options.
And it's that balance. And right now what we don't have is balance. We need trapping and chemical tools.
So is this a fight at the county level, at a state agency, legislatively? Where's the venue for conversations?
It's now at the state level.
Okay.
Legislation was passed that forced DPR to remove these products to do a reevaluation. DPR is currently doing an evaluation and considering mitigations to address this. Our view is we need an outcome sooner rather than later. The later the outcome, the more you're going to have use more aggressive tools to control them. And I think DPR is challenged by the fact that you have a lot of these groups have a lot of influence in the legislature and in other areas of regulatory government. And so it's not just on DPR to make that decision. So what we need, what we look for is for DPR to come out sooner than later with recommendations that will provide the ability to use some of these tools. And if mitigations need to be added to them to make sure that they can be used effectively. Again, we don't want chemical tools out there and then the use of them is so restricted that then you have resistance building up because they're not effective. We need real effective mitigations.
You need to scale the rodents back to a manageable level and give us the tools to get it back to a manageable level. We'll stop using the tools in a smart, integrated management way. But if you use the tool a little bit, but not enough to solve the problem, you're going to make the problem even worse.
Exactly.
Okay. That sounds like a thorny issue. Well, I thank you for coming on the show and taking me through it. I feel like I've got a much better understanding. I hope the audience will engage. Do you have any final words that you want to pass along?
I would just say that, again, nobody who is dealing with this directly is looking for some sort of a chemical annihilation of rats that can then impact predators. Everybody in agriculture, if you drive down the road, you see all sorts of owl houses built by farmers. We love these non-target species. We're not looking to ignore the risks to them. We just want to make sure that the farm food is safe, the farm labor is safe, communities are safe. And in order to do that, we have to incorporate reason into this discussion. And that's absent.
That's a great way to end the show. Thanks for another episode of Sac Town Talks, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.